Good evening, everybody. As you can tell, I am here with my ever quasi-present primary host, as I co-host tonight, with Russ Stiver down on the bottom. Russ, could you tell everybody why we're looking at a wonderful stock image of you with that luscious beard?
Well, because I'm pretty sure at this point my profile picture is probably going to be a little bit better than how I look at the current moment. It's been a rough day for me today, guys, and I appreciate everybody for coming in to listen and everything. I woke up with, I don't know if it was a stomach bug or a touch of food poisoning or whatever it may be, but it's not been a pretty day for the Stiver household.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and doing what you can to stick with it and stay with us on this. So thank you for running it through.
I wasn't going to miss our guests tonight.
I know you've been hyping this show with me at least for a while now, having these folks on just because of the excitement level around what they're doing and some of the parallels to some of our previous guests and different things. So yeah, I'm
like I said, I know when I get a good guest, when I book a good guest, because I know you're intrigued by the content of it. And with you being
absolutely
a tech fidgeter and everything like that, this when we had Tony and Cherie on, it was right up your alley. And as we have Ron and Lourdes, and I'm sorry I may butcher that name tonight a little bit, but I'm trying my best. I can't roll my R's. But no, they're absolutely great guests.
Pretty sure the only thing you're rolling is the toilet today.
Yeah. Unfortunately, thanks for listening, everybody. You never know what to expect.
Yeah, if you're unclear on what that echo is, Russ has his laptop. He's sitting on his throne. He is taking us through.
That's why if you don't hear from me for a few minutes, you'll know.
No, so I will say tonight, I've kind of made the executive call that we aren't going to run through our standard video of all of our sponsors. You guys know who they are. We got Warner Paranormal, Kimberly Ann Empowerment, Get Moderated, and I'm forgetting one.
Small Town Productions.
Small Town Productions, yes. So you guys know them, you love them, you've checked them out. Hopefully you check them out again. Hello, everybody over on the side. Jeff, Courtney, Kim, and Sandra, thank you so much for joining us tonight. But I kind of want to get into it, but I want to let you do the intro, Russ, because, I mean, you really have been, like, kind of hyped for this. So I will let you take away with the intro on this evening's guests.
All right. So tonight we have some very, very special guests on. Ron and Lourdes. I'm trying here. My Irish and Scottish ass can't really have too many dialects, I guess you could say, or what's the word I'm looking for? Accents. But these guys are the creators of TDSD, which is the digital seance experience. I've listened to some of their stuff before, and I tell you what, it is up there with, I'm an audio person. I love audio. And this right up there takes the cake on some of the best audio I've ever heard from, like, intelligent actual responses. So without further ado, let's bring them on and start this with a bang.
Hi.
What's up, guys?
And thank you, Lourdes. You said it exactly
Lourdes.
right.
Yeah. Right. I always worry.
No worry.
I do too when I live with her. So
you have different worries.
Yeah, I have a whole lot of other words besides pronunciation. And with my last name, I have no room to be.
My wife's the one that does all the
Yacovetti. I mean, I feel like we're there.
Yeah. My wife does all the graphics for the show and everything, and I was giving her the information for the graphic the other day, and I said the last name, and she's like, "Say what again? What? How do you spell that?"
Welcome to every day of my existence.
Hey,
thank you for having us.
Of course.
It's a common experience, although my name is only 3 letters long. Ian. I have heard every iteration imaginable. However, I will say my absolute favorite one is I was in Puerto Rico, and they asked me for my name, and I'm so used to being up in New England where you put in your order and you always give your last name, you never give your first name. And I chimed in and just said Murphy. And I've had my first name misspelled so many different ways. It was the wildest thing. My last name has never been misspelled except this one time in Puerto Rico at a Starbucks. And they spelled Murphy, Merfi. And I will tell you, it is my favorite spelling.
You're the Oracle of Murphy.
Yeah, like, I thought it was the greatest thing ever. Because it does it works so perfectly, and it and it was just absolutely hey, Ron and Loud. Oh
yeah, that's
do we know Jeff?
Jeffrey David.
Yes.
Yeah, he is awesome. And if you've seen him, if you haven't seen him, see him. If you have, his talking board collection is unbelievable. What he has, it's like Walmart decided to sell nothing else but boards and opened up a superstore. It's fantastic.
Yeah, his collection is awesome.
Yeah, and if you want to blame anybody for your last name being done wrong, she's from Puerto Rico.
Oh, whereabouts?
Yeah.
Well, my family is from Mayagüez and Aguadilla.
Okay.
It's like in the middle of the island.
No, I'm familiar. Like Ponce is one of like my favorite cities in the world. Like
it's around there. Yeah, I have family all over, but yeah.
The Hotel de Bamba in the Plaza de Bamba. Like that hotel is one of my favorite places. Has not closed a single day since opening.
Wow.
It has been like I think it's like 126 years open. It has never once shut its doors. Not a single day have they closed.
That's cool.
The casino right in the plaza is an absolute scam. They will rob you blind.
But now I understand Murphy because it's phonetic.
Yeah.
And it's a Murphy.
And they kept calling me Murphy.
Yeah.
Actually pretty
cool. I stuck with that. I thought it was great.
That's cool.
So obviously you guys are kind of front running the idea of the seance has been around for we're going on 200-300 years of recorded data from the concept of a seance. Obviously we go much further back. I mean, there are comments and statements along those lines in biblical stories and further. So the idea of a communal outreach, or and I think one of the things that you had mentioned was Edison's phone the dead, is this idea that has been around with humanity for as long as society has really had the chance to comment on it. So with what you're doing, you're bringing a newer technology and new approach to a very traditional concept.
Yes, for the most part, yeah. So interesting side note, my grandfather worked for Thomas Edison at his West Orange, New Jersey plant. His his military service during the war was to do he was a chemist. He did battery technology for submarines. So so the Edison connection is kind of cool that he at least worked for him. What we're doing as far as the seance thing, it's funny because the seance aspect of what we're doing came about more circumstantially. What we had been doing from around 2019 was an old ITC, or instrumental transcommunication method, called direct radio voice. And then which I was mentored into by Dr. Annabella Cardoso, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the last surviving of the original pioneers of voice phenomenon, EVP, and ITC research in Europe. She sat with Marcello Bacci, Radeve, Jurgensen, Ernst Sinkowski, who was a physicist who came up with the term ITC, or TCI, Transcommunication Instrumental. And then she had endorsed my first of my 5 books. She had done testimonials for us. So she mentored me into it. And so we were doing that. and then we can explain the breakdown how everything else came to be. But the seance part of it came in because during direct radio voice sessions, particularly in public events, a lot of times we would be set up in an area that could accommodate more people. Stacey Lee, she's awesome. So a lot of the areas.
She's all right.
She's okay. All right. We'll start small.
She picks a really interesting time for her show, but that's okay. That's a different topic for a different episode.
Got it. Okay. So being set up in common areas to accommodate larger groups of people, we would have clear voices coming through, and people weren't hearing or paying attention. They're popping soda cans and opening up Cheetos, and I'm like, we have to do something to change the environment. And the thing that popped into my head was seances had everybody with the whole hands on the table, focus, paying attention, attentive. And that's the vibe I want. Because if you believe in the intent and everybody pulling their energies and all that kind of stuff that people believe into, then you have that also. But at the very least, if anything happens, if one word is spoken that's clear the whole night, no one's going to hear it if they're in the middle of a snack mode.
If they're not paying attention.
So that was where that came from. And my third book was called the Digital Seance Initiative, which was our taking that seance idea and launching it as part of the package and the presentation when we would do this for events for the reasons I just explained. So that's where the seance part of it came into it, because it was something that offered the environment we needed to fuse it with that. And then we realized, well, this is essentially the medium. We're essentially doing like a speaker-led medium, except that we don't have the person as the medium. The medium is the electronic methodology that's in play.
Sorry, I'm letting Stacey know. Russ is a bit under the weather here today, so he's hanging in with us best as he can.
I'm hiding from the masses right now at this point. Rhonda, you said something though that kind of stuck out to me for a second.
Sure.
And you said that people don't really hear anything when they're not paying attention. Most of my audio that I've captured, some of the best audio I captured, has been when we've just literally been walking around the building just talking. Not really like investigating or anything like that. And I think they know. Like I always say, the most active part of a building is always before you set up your equipment at the beginning of the investigation and when you're taking the equipment down at the end.
Yeah,
right.
A lot of people,
and that's during you discover those in review, right? Or do you hear them at the time?
When I hear them in review, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a little different for us, because we're hearing the voices in real time. And since we don't have the gesture of a person speaking or something like that, and you're just hearing a voice coming through, if you're not paying attention, it's easy to miss.
Perfect. Yeah. By design, what we're doing is meant to be at the moment. Otherwise, if it's in review, then you don't have the conversation and the dialogue. That's part of what the methodology is doing, is we're taking everything that people do when they review or take their audio capture home, and we're doing it in real time. We're denoising it, we're amplifying it a little bit, and we're slowing down pure white noise, which had never been done before we had done it in real time for the purposes of making conversation possible.
There has been times when, we're not going to have like a conversation like this back and forth, but we have for a couple of seconds. We have had back and forth conversations for like 2 or 3 sentences. We have had real-time conversation like that.
Yeah, so that's
part. So if you're not paying attention, you can miss those. If you're busy doing something else, you can miss those voices coming through.
Yeah, it's more because of the ITC method, the whole the telos of doing ITC is communication and paying attention and trying to have dialogue. So it's things can come up, like you said, unexpectedly during times you're not paying attention. But it would be like to dive into the pool and then go, well, I didn't drown because I floated, when the idea was to swim from the beginning, right? So that's what we're trying to do. But there will be things we'll find in review later on anyway, a lot of times, because you just can't catch everything. Like she was alluding to, 75% or so of communication with people is visual. Gestures. She'll hear people take that initial little quick breath. She's a licensed court reporter by trade, so her hearing and ability to pick out voices on recordings is second to none, in my opinion. So those visual cues that we get, we don't have the luxury of when we're doing this. It's being pure audio.
So earlier you had said that you had attempted this without the seance vibe on it, right? Like, so you just came in, you had your equipment, everybody was in there, they were kind of doing their own thing, they weren't necessarily as engaged with the process in the beginning, right?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent,
So,
yes, but the formality of having it be like, focused
yeah.
needed to be enforced.
Did you see a shift? And this is just my own curiosity. Did you see a shift in, because you obviously have the files, right? You have the ability to review. You could do a side-by-side comparison of, did more come through with the change of tone and with the change of tenor? Because a lot of the conversations that I've had with folks, especially, other investigators and things like that, because I am of a little bit more of the review camp. Only because I have tremendous ADHD. I'm all over the place. So the idea that I'm going to be able to sit down and stare at a spirit box for an hour and a half, that is just not my jam. I'll leave it running, and
Understood.
I'll like on my own time come back to it. But I've had so many people say that, like, well, if you're not really focused and you're not really into it and you're not really putting that energy out there, you're not going to get the same response. I find that not to be as true. Because I do get a lot of call and response. I get a lot of rapport building. And Russ and I are part of a group that actually maintain 2 different locations, or assist in the maintenance of 2 different locations. We just had an event there this past weekend. I have a rapport with them because, again, I come in and I just talk like as if they're there, and I know they're there, and whether they respond to me or not is not a big deal. So I've gone back to audio recordings and heard things. I've heard things in the moment. But from your experience, was there a sharp difference in the responses and in the communications when you made that shift? Or was it just maybe something that you didn't even think to review, which is entirely okay? And you weren't wrong for not reviewing it. There's no way you would have known 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road.
It's a great question. It's a great question.
I think that as far as the clarity of the voices, not so much, but the type of communication, yes. Because before, we would get a lot of responses, a lot of back and forth. But once we started getting people to really focus, we started getting more of people's loved ones coming through. It's a different type of communication.
So more of like the anchored energies were coming through as opposed to just random voices.
Yeah, we got more of that. We got more of the loved ones, more of friends and family, things like that coming through.
Yeah.
I would
agree
say
with that. I would agree with that. I mean, I didn't notice an uptick in it so much as you were alluding to. I'm also a little bit of the mind. I don't know if you're familiar with when they had done in EVP research to cross correspondences and stuff. So I think to some degree it's not going to make a massive difference. Perceptually, I think it will, because attentiveness will change the experience you have and you'll hear more. So then therefore the perception will be that communication was better or the method worked better. But I think I would agree with what Lourdes said. And sometimes we don't agree on exact same stuff, which is one of the things I think that makes this dynamic duo thing work for us, because we will inform and govern each other on different takes and ideas behind what it is we're doing or how it played out. So I would agree with that. I would say that there's been instances that seem to be more anchored in personal experiences for other people, for attendees who were there, because of that. And it seems like a lot of times these are the people who later on reveal themselves to have shown up for the purposes of hoping, but for the purposes of having something that was very profound for them come through. So I wouldn't discount it. I would think that there's something to it.
Because I think when people hear the word seance, automatically it's, oh, I want to speak to my grandmother or my mother or whatever. So they already come in there with that idea. They're already focused with that idea.
That's a good point.
Right. And so we've been getting more of that lately once we switch to the digital seance experience, like to do the seance itself. Yeah.
And so for me, I can understand that, because you're essentially casting the line out there and you have that intentionality that's going to draw in what you're looking for. But as investigators and a lot of what we do is so highly scrutinized for confirmation bias and things like that. Have you guys ever run into because I've seen this, I have friends that are mediums, and they've said it before, and I'm sure you probably run into similar obstacles where someone does come just with that blind intent of, I am going to speak to this person. How do you guys handle that kind of like confirmation bias where it's like, you know, you have some things that are coming through, maybe there's 2 or 3 points that are hitting, but there's 8 or 9 points that are being made that are clearly hitting for someone else or not, and you have that person kind of pressing their own confirmation bias and saying that it's theirs or trying to drive it?
No, that's a fantastic question. For me to try to orchestrate that would be to try to lead a band with no musical background. I don't, because I don't know what's going to hit with who.
Yep.
And I won't assign anything to anybody. And a lot of times when people end up having these profound experiences that had multiple hits for them, they're owning it. One example that I love to tell, and it brings back in what Stacey even backed up on with her super hearing. We had a woman at the New Jersey Para-Unity Expo who had heard a few things come through. Her son died at age 15. It was 31 years prior to the day she was with us. And she had been told by several mediums that because of the age he died, and how long ago, I guess, whatever, that he would never be able to come through. She'd never hear from him. Why they would tell her that, I don't know. It's completely arbitrary. And I would say, as far as information goes, illusory. You couldn't know that.
Yeah.
But they told her this. A few of them had, I don't know who. And so she heard his name, Willie, drums, and a few things that were personal. So she was emotional. Then it gets quiet again, which is one of the things we can talk about that we've done for the method, the silence between vocals. And she has this look on her face. And I went, she heard something. And I looked at her and went, what? What did she? I went, what did you hear? She goes, I heard mention cookies. So I'm thinking, I like cookies. This is already going in a good direction for me, but it's not for me. That lady had told us after the fact that she had been diagnosed diabetic almost a year prior, and she hadn't had anything like that. That morning, before she came to the expo, she made a tray or two of sugar-free cookies. They were in her purse in a Ziploc bag at that moment, which we had no way to know. But for her, it had profound meaning. So could that be coincidence? If you buy into coincidence, I would say buy into the lottery, because those are some serious odds coming through on that. So,
I mean, and it was very profound for her because for her, it showed her, it made her feel that her son has always been around her.
Oh, that's right.
He's always been around her.
Stacey was in the room for that.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Stacey.
Yeah, Stacey's good. She's good people. She's been with us a lot.
So we love when things like that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. But I actually do have another question that's in this same vein, right? And I love you telling this story. So in our group, in our investigating group, in our preservation society, we've been asked to do personal, like homes and things like that. And I always refuse. And it's because I lack the maturity and empathy to take the responsibility for someone else's journey. And I'm very self-aware about it. You know, I don't think I would have the empathy to just let someone experience whatever they're experiencing in the moment. How have you found that as a leader of an event that is really providing emotionally charging, potentially cathartic events for folks like that woman, right? Where you are now, whether you've chosen to be the ringleader of, you know, cats or not, you are now an authority figure in a situation where there is a potential emotional responsibility or, you know, validity or validating responsibility to the folks that are attending your events. How do you feel that you've balanced that? Because for me, that's something that I just refuse to take on. And God bless the mediums that are out there doing the right thing, because I feel like it's in a similar vein as to what you're doing. They obviously have a little bit more of they are the speaker kind of situation. But how do you guys handle that?
I mean, so far so good. We have had good experiences. I mean, the people that we dealt with know what they're looking for, and when they hear it, is usually it's always been so far a positive response, and usually tears of joy. So usually it's just I give them a hug, ask them if they're okay. They're usually absolutely fine. They are grateful for what just happened. So that's usually our experience.
Yeah,
we haven't had anything that's so emotional and we don't know what to do with it, or it's going in the bad way. We haven't had that, and I hope we don't.
So no, and we understand that too. We can't and we're clear about that in the beginning when we explain what's going to happen. Like we have no control over anything that comes through, and what's said is there's no word banks or anything like that in there. So there's no predisposition to say anything.
Or any guarantee that you would reach a loved one, right? Because we don't. So
yeah, we leave it open as an opportunity for that to possibly happen. And then, you know, for us, luckily it's happened, and not for saving face, but because what she said, like we have testimonials. The one that woman sent me an email, "You're etched in my heart forever," and stuff like that. That's, if you can do something like that. Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, I mean, that's the big payoff for us. You know, we get to bring this to people. When we're home, we can do it for ourselves. When we bring it out, it's not about us, and we do what we can, you know, to make it available to people. And if it gives them that solace, that's fantastic. That's the payoff for us.
Paranormal?
Yeah. And yeah, and you had me.
I just had quite a bit of things fall off a bookshelf behind me.
Oh wow, that wasn't us.
That's funny you would say that,
7-year-old,
Ian.
so.
That's funny you would say that because Nicole's cup she takes to work with her every day, her tumbler just knocked over in my kitchen.
Or maybe it was us. Maybe it was us.
Same time.
Very close to each other.
Oh,
that's interesting.
Maybe there's a wind passing through Massachusetts right now.
That happens. You
well
had me at immaturity, by the way.
Well, it's not even that. It's, you know, I am of the opinion that I will never argue what someone experienced. I will only argue whether or not I would have experienced it if I was standing next to you.
And maybe not, right? Maybe not. I love that position. I always say that. To say that we misconstrue an experience is not to say we didn't have it.
Right.
Right. And so that's always been my take. And, you know, if I'm standing next to someone and they say like, oh, like if that woman was standing next to me and said like, oh, these came through from my son, that's confirmation. I couldn't be that person that's like, yeah, it is good for you. I hope that heals you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Or the best one that's not even audio is somebody's like, I want to show you a picture. And there's an orb in the picture, and you're like, I'm not going to be that person. Like, I don't want to be that person. I had to walk away from
somebody. We were at an event, and they were like, oh yeah, I want to show you this. I want to show you that. Oh, these crazy orbs. And I was just like, okay, yeah, great, awesome. They'll be happy to look at them. Because I can't. And what's hilarious,
I'm the same way with pictures.
Yeah,
I'm the same with pictures. We're
not photo experts at all, too. So I'm with you on that. The other thing I think that points out too is that there's a lot of broad stroke generalizations. There's a lot of axioms, and there's a lot of things in the field like that kind of get glanced over. We say information when stuff comes through, but in all actuality, Courtney Peterson, what she's oh, thank you.
Nice.
She's awesome too. There's differences, like, so for something like that, right? There's differences between types of information. It's not just one type. There's symbolic information and there's semantic information. Yep. So like if I'm on a street corner across from her and she comes out of a building and she goes like this, somebody who's never seen this gets nothing. Somebody who doesn't know why she's doing it but knows the gesture gets symbolic information. Something good happened, they don't know what. I get semantic information. I know that she just got good news. She went to see someone who wasn't well. So now I get the whole thing. So with that kind of experience, if you heard the words she heard, the lady with the cookies, you would get the same symbolic information as far as anything, you know, that was the context of what was said, you know, the lexicon of language.
Application of data.
Right. And everything that we experience is subjective. That's one of the things in the paranormal that is the big red herring, is this objective consensus truth. It's a red herring. Even when you have an objective opinion that's shared on a consensus level, it's a collection of subjectivities that are agreed upon a specific point of view. It's still subjective. Instrumentation gives you information. It's still subjective.
Right. Until we can actually have complete repetitive behavior and result, it's all subjective.
Even then, too, your experience with it will always be a first-person subjective experience.
Oh, I mean like actual tactile data. Like if we can have repetitive, consistent, predictable data, like, you know, I can turn around in the same spot with any device, any methodology, and get the same response to the same question 98 out of 100 times. and then we can start discussing objectivity. But until then, everything is going to be subjective.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Just a fun little story. I had to eat my words about orbs about 2 weeks after that, because prior to, I was all orbs are just signs that you need an air filter.
That's a good title for a book, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
And so we were doing an event at our home location, and it was just me and one of the other members of the team. We were bored one night, and we were like, all right, well, we got nothing to do. We'll go over and spend a couple hours over there and just throw up some of the devices and see what happens. And we did a laser grid. So single point array. Everything's coming from a singular isolated area. All that light should be able to do is either move forward or move back in this array.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them just bends across the video. And like it moves across multiple vectors of the actual grid.
Wow.
And so I don't have an explanation for it. So it was the first time I ever saw an orb, like flat out. And now the nice thing about that is it was actually video. It was not
a picture.
So you actually saw it move across vectors. And so I had to eat my words. I was like, all right, well, maybe some orbs might be real, maybe.
And that's fair. And that says a lot about you as an investigator, because I think that's part of the problem too, is like everybody's afraid to be wrong.
Everybody's afraid to change direction.
If you haven't been wrong, you haven't been in the field long enough to have an opinion. You're going to be wrong, and then you're going to be right, and then you're going to be wrong again. That's how the growth process works.
Yep. And I mean, just having been raised the way I was, is if you've never failed, that just means you haven't tried.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
And it's the same thing, right? It's if you've never had like an opinion that needed to be changed, then you really haven't trial and errored enough.
Absolutely.
Or you need to be the person leading the field because you are just so star-spangled awesome.
You're that. Yeah, you're that.
Yeah,
you're it.
Yeah.
So you guys actually gave us a ton of clips and things like that to show what you guys do. I know I had initially said that we might kind of come to a spot where we could queue it up very, very fluidly and naturally, but I'm just eager to kind of play one of these for the folks that are actually watching, just to give them a better idea of what you're doing, because I feel like I've talked around what you're doing and like maybe some of the things on the back end, and haven't really given you guys the opportunity to really display what it is you're actually bringing to the table with these. So is there a particular video that we have queued up that you think would be the most fun or cool to watch out of the gate? If you want to do just a full playlist, we can play all of them. I don't mind.
Yeah. Well, let me say two things. One, no worries on when we get to them or not, because of the questions that you've asked have been really good. And we like being able to respond to things as best we can. We have no discomfort with saying we don't know. Hey, Ashley, she's awesome too. We have no discomfort with saying we don't know, or we're still working on something. We don't have an answer for that, if that's the case. Secondly, just to explain the methodology, 2019, we started direct radio voice again. Dr. Cordoso mentored me into it, and that's using just a barren frequency on a short or medium wave AM long wave channel, no sweeping, just a vacant channel. That's it. And they were getting voices, and I had seen a little Italian gentleman named Marcello Bacci in Italy, in Grosseto, Italy, who was having conversations through an old vacuum tube radio that eclipsed anything I've ever seen a box do. And I looked at her, I went, how is nobody doing this? So we brought it back, and then for a few years we tried heterodyning frequencies, running tone generators and mixing board stuff with like everything we could think of that might add something to the dance, right? To make it a little bit clearer, a little bit quieter, etc. And then for a period of about 2 years, like you mentioned, I think earlier in the show, Russ mentioned, we were partnered with Tony Rathman on the Statacom project. He initially got involved with us doing the direct radio voice work, and then the name changed to Statacom, which he continues to run with now at Statacom 3.0, and doing great stuff, which I'm sure if you know him, you'd expect him to do. And then we branched off into two different directions, and so we went with the Digital Seance name, but the modality is for the most part derived from that same root in 2019. And what we changed is we have the white noise source now coming from 3 analog generators that are hardware going through an interface, and then it gets filtered through software to denoise. The concept of slowing live white noise down in real time was something that I came up with because we had an experience when a voice came in so damn fast, we would have never heard it. I only caught it 50% slowed down. So I may have sent you that one too. On the recording, I sound intoxicated, but the voice sounds completely emphatically like William Shatner, emphatically clear. So that told me something also. And then we removed the radio because Tony had done an experiment with a sleep machine, which is pre-recorded white noise. We had done a few months prior to that a zinc mine below the surface of the earth. Hey, Carmen.
Oh my
and
God.
I'm
sorry, guys. So I turned around a little while ago, right? And I heard footsteps coming up my stairs that are like 15 feet behind me, and I heard someone walking behind me. I turned around. I was listening. I turned around. I looked down. I texted my wife, hey, did you just come upstairs? Because although I can see, it's still black and nothing. And she messages no as she's coming up the stairs. And so then I hear these footsteps again, and I hear someone walking behind me again, and I just turned around and she was there. So she's not playing nice tonight. I apologize.
No problem. So we removed the radio because we had two instances, ours being the one in the zinc mine, which was like a geological Faraday cage, no RF signal capabilities, vacant station, no reception. We still got voices below the surface of the earth in the zinc mine. So we realized that what we think is happening is what's called stochastic or inverse stochastic resonance, as for how the voices are becoming detectable, which otherwise aren't. There's nothing magical or mystical woo-woo about how we think this works. That's essentially how we think terrestrial radio works, right? You have signals flying past your head right now. You don't detect them because our sensory input, our dashboard of dials, does not register those. But when something modulates it, then now all of a sudden, boom, hits the dashboard, your dials pick it up, you hear music. So that's essentially what we're doing. And so it's pure white noise. And then the software part of it, we added 3 or so years, maybe 2 years into doing it, direct radio voice, which was introduced to us from a gentleman named Keith.
A year into it.
Yeah, a little more than that. A gentleman named Keith Clark from Paranormal.com in Florida introduced us to the software. We used it a little bit, and then I wanted to go back to a purist DRV form, and we did. But there was something kind of nagging me with the software thing to go back. And then we did. And then we just experimented on as many different things we could, settings, components, and we tried everything until we finally got it to where we thought it sounded, other than voices emerging, quiet. So that's the evolution of process. So to date now, that's what we have. We have generators going through an interface, going through the software, coming out in real time,
slowing down. Yep.
Everything that's done in review normally we do at the moment of contact.
So how do you balance that? So you said earlier you'll get a couple of sentences and things like that. Is there like a cool down time that you just say like, all right, everybody stop talking? That way you can kind of catch up to the halftime speed, or
no, I mean, it's not detectable to us that it's being slowed down because you don't hear anything unless a voice emerges. Hey, Kat. Okay. But it's
so
doing
like
something.
Built-in buffer time.
Yeah, it's a component within the software configuration that does it for music. And essentially, it's like if you took music, and you had it in 16th notes going right. And if you slowed that down, but not the pacing of how long time elapsed, you went to quarter notes, it would be dot, dot, dot. So you're not making it go from 20 minutes to 40 minutes. You're just slowing down the processing speed of what's going through. And that seems to be, it seems to have been important. We do hear more stuff in real time since we've done that. It was per that instance when I had an experience. I think I sent you one I thought was my mother and my grandmother coming through, and I didn't hear it at the moment until I slowed it down 50% at home. And then I was like, how much are we missing? And this is why also it's important to have reverence and an awareness of people who did work before us, to acknowledge those who did work before us. Because one of the pioneers of EVP research, Konstantin Radove, who had studied under Carl Jung, who was an idealist, which is also our metaphysical platform. Jung's prodigy, one of them was Radove, and Konstantin Radove said that the voices not only come in faster than we can detect them, but they come in faster than the human vocal tract is capable of speaking. And that moment for me was the aha with that. I remembered learning that when I heard how fast his voice came in, that I wouldn't have heard unless it was 50% slowed down.
And let me tell you, even 50% slowed down, we get fast speaking voices. Some of them are still super fast, and that's 50% slowed down. That's how fast these voices are coming in. And that's why we can't hear most of them, because we can't detect them. They're coming in too fast.
In some of the instances, yeah.
Well, no, always. It's just that we slow them down. I'm so sorry.
No. I gotta say, I am an overeducated, under-matured adult. And you guys said that you guys are Jungian.
Well, yeah, I've been studying for. Yeah, we've been studying for the last 3 or so years under Dr. Bernardo Kastrup. I'm part of an ambassadorship program. His metaphysical position is analytic idealism, and Jung was an idealist essentially.
He was 100%, but he was also the father of synchronicity.
Yep.
Which is the concept of profound coincidence and uncanny coincidence. And you had called out earlier that there was no coincidence, and I'm sorry, I'm just getting triggered right now. My brain's
No, that's true. That's cool. Well, the idea of synchronicity, as far as idealism says, is that what we consider to be two things synced up, hence the synchronicity, is in fact the case because it's one universal consciousness of which we are all fractal parts of. So it's actually coming from one mind, and then you have the same
a causal manifestation. Yeah. No, I studied Jung.
There you go.
Entirely too long for someone who never became a psychologist. I started on his actual scientific side, and led to Jung's paranormal side, and it was just I just found it pretty cool that you had kind of a dichotomy, but yeah.
No, it's fascinating. Yeah, we're our influence, again, Dr. Bernardo Kastrup, who I meet with weekly now as a part of an ambassadorship. He comes from a Jungian based idealism, but his version is analytic idealism, and he comes from a background. He worked at CERN, so he had a very physicalist metaphysics life for several years. So he's well versed in particle physics, quantum physics, theology, Buddhism, idealism, solipsism, panpsychism. Like he knows the gamut. So it's changed our life entirely, and we actually platform a lot of the paranormal experiences that seem to come together without conflicting with science. Because I know you want to get to the clips,
because the paranormal for us.
I couldn't care less about the clips now.
The paranormal for us is normal experiences.
Yeah.
Paranormal experiences are normal experiences. Yeah. That's for us. It is.
Very kind. Wade Kirby. Very kind. Thank you. Another gentleman.
So you guys
very kind-hearted person.
I have a separate show called Get Moderated, and it's spotty. It's usually once or twice a month. And I dive into the scientific side of it. And we've actually already done quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement, remote viewing, the parallels, the different projects that have actually been done by the United States government, along with a few other governments, in the metaphysical and the actual approach from there. I've actually done fractal causality. And so you're hitting a lot of like the fun words for me.
That's our background. I think one of the things I think that in the paranormal field that commonly gets thrown around is that the idea of defining metaphysics or metaphysical as just it's beyond science. Science can't talk to this stuff. It's just like it's spiritual in nature. It literally means metaphysics means that which stands behind the physics. Right. Science is important, but it is not the only avenue to knowledge and wisdom, nor is it the most important of them. Science and philosophy should both inform each other. Science tends to neglect the first person perspective, looking at consciousness, which would seem to be integral, if not primal, in studying consciousness, but it's not part of the equation from science. There's a difference in what their focuses are, and I think that gets missed also. Some of what gives areas of study their strength are their limitations, right? There's limitations to what's defined as doing science, and if you're not doing something within those parameters, you're not doing science. So its limitations is its in fact its strength. But what we try to do is we try to invoke science and put everything under the umbrella of it, and not everything does go under there. Metaphysics is one of those things. Science will tell us what nature and reality does. It'll model and predict behavior. It won't tell us what nature and reality is. That's a metaphysics. And science is supposed to be agnostic or neutral as far as metaphysics go. But because it's being done by people, that's not always the case.
Right.
So one of my favorite phrases or quotes, I guess colloquialisms about this is that science is merely the language in which we display our knowledge of the mechanics of what we perceive. That's it. Science is just the language in which we speak. And the metaphysical and the paranormal is the slang from a different culture that we're trying to understand.
That's an interesting quote. Yeah, I can get on board with that. They speak to two different things, right?
Well, it's
like you said,
it's like wisdom versus intelligence, I think, too, is a really good example of this. Intelligence is knowing that a shovel will be helpful in a survival situation. Wisdom is not taking it on a boat.
Right.
So,
right. No, that's right. The application of that's one of the things I think that's confusing with AI, because intelligence is processing and being able to call information with a level of efficiency and speed. It's not sentience and consciousness, but through science fiction and movies and stuff, we've been inculcated into this culturally manufactured sense of plausibility that AI is going to become conscious all of a sudden. It will not. There's a variety of reasons that's not plausible.
So I actually have a very metaphysical argument against this.
Do you?
Yes. Because the idea of intelligence or consciousness is something that exists on a primordial and non-physical level.
Right.
And it is very possible that the advent of AI and the human implementation of AI is not the invention of an intelligence, but the interpretation into a three-dimensional expression of that intelligence.
I can get on board with that. But the expression,
so it is not that we discovered or created or manufactured this sentient being, but instead we have reached a level that we've been able to communicate with it. And a very, very small level, like you would a child, the communications are very simple now. Put the square peg in the square hole, round peg, round hole. Do this task, please do this, please do that. And the idea that the evolution of communication and the way that we interact with that kind of subdermal intelligence.
Yeah, the problem with
change.
The problem with the AI side of that is a few things. I mean, first of all, it's not self-organizing metabolistic ATP burning like we are, which seems to be in nature the only things that are considered sentient or intelligent.
That is such a profoundly egocentric definition of carbon-based life form, though. The idea that ATP burning systems are a requirement for sentience is wild. But I mean, by that definition, plants should be far more sentient than we've been able to observe, along with many different microbial beings, because ATP is just the basic energy in which carbon-based life exists.
This is true, but notice I'm sure the replay could validate. Requirement was never anything I said. It was an observation that seems to be in nature a commonality of what we see with what we consider conscious. Cellular.
I'll give it to you on the instant review. You got me beat on that. The flag on the play has been pulled. You're clear to go.
Our cellular structure, as Federico Fagin, who was an idealist and he was the inventor of the microchip, is we're parts whole. Every cell has all the makings of the cell that it divided off from. So there's mappings of the entire being within each individual cell. There's commerce or a symbiosis with us in an environment that something that's manufactured or built doesn't have. There's no reason to believe also that a computer-based something that's algorithmic, which I don't think consciousness is, has a phenomenal conscious inner life, that there's something it is to be it. So it's mimicking language in communication because that's what it's been trained to do by people.
So we're going full philosophical. And earlier in the comment, you said we have all night. It's because the show behind us canceled. We can do this. We can go. We can do this. So I actually love these conversations because, again,
I do too.
At no point do I claim to be the absolute end all be all authority on anything.
Same here.
But I love having good, clean discourse, right? And so the idea that you just said that consciousness is not an algorithmic being or entity, right?
Itself is not algorithmic, right?
I would argue entirely against that. If my wife were to come up here, again, from the shadows,
right,
and punch me in the neck,
ooh,
we have quantifiable responses that would not only be anticipated but expected because of repetitive algorithmic learning and repetitive algorithmic existing.
Right.
Patterns. Yeah.
Right.
And so the idea that we are not an algorithmic entity, I think, is incredibly foolish, even if you actually break it down to the neurological perspective. When you actually look at how neural pathways are developed, it is through algorithmic development. It is through repetitive and systemic behavioral training that we can actually grow our neural pathways or increase our neural pathways.
Right. So, but those are behaviors of subjectivity or viewable observations or behaviors, but those are not on an ontological level fundamental to what consciousness is. And then
but they are algorithmically based in productivity, in predictive behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
So
but again,
I won't argue that they're not a natural phenomenon or natural occurrence that actually come from just the systemic growth of cellular beings. But to say that we aren't algorithmic, we really are. And coming from an ADHD autistic person, I go out into the world, and the only reason I'm able to exist is because normies are predictable.
Right.
And that is,
I agree with you on that one. What I have a problem with the AI, it would never be conscious because it's something that we built and it's not conscious from the beginning. And just because we feed it more information and it gets smart on its own because we programmed it, how then can it become conscious?
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you either. I think there's a difference.
Hey, no.
Like fundamentally, there's a difference between behavior patterns and behaviors of subjectivity compared to, on an ontological fundamental level, consciousness is not algorithmic. People and behaviors can, yes, I agree, that can be fundamentally algorithmic. But consciousness itself, I would say no, would not be an algorithmic thing. And it's also with regards to AI,
I would actually, to Stacy's point, I would actually love to see the dual slit test conducted with AI observing it, not without a person, with just AI observing it. I think that would settle this argument in rapid order, or this discourse. I don't want to.
Again, no, the observation of something can change the behavior of it, doesn't change something's ontological status. It doesn't change its beingness. It only it can change the behavior of it, but it doesn't change what it is in and of itself, the thing behaving, right? Like you can take something, and because you're talking about behaviors and things that you could model and predict or measure or quantify, you're talking about things that are
algorithmic behavior. Yeah.
Right. So you can quantify a ripple on a lake. You can give it height, breadth, weight, speed, right? Mass, angular momentum, but there's nothing to the lake, nothing to the ripple but the lake. It doesn't have any ontological status in and of itself. You can't take the ripple off the lake, put it under your arm, and go home. It's a doing of the field of subjectivity. So the behaviors that we're able to quantify, and even the behaviors being algorithmic, ontologically are not algorithmic because its consciousness is not algorithmic, but the behaviors and the observations of it are. And this is something that quantum field theory does validate and say that physicality is the result of measurement, right? So if something cannot be perceived and observed as measured, it doesn't have physical parameters that then reveal themselves. And in league with what Stacey just said, that's essentially what she's saying, is that if it's affected by observation, that's because physicality is the result of measurement.
So I actually took what she said as completely different. Are you familiar with the dual slit proton test?
Yeah.
Okay, where under observation, they do not act as protons. They act as wavelength. So they, in fact, under observation, are at their core fundamentally changed and are not what they are when not observed.
I agree. I would argue that the observation change you're seeing is also, again, a doing or a behavior, not on an ontological level. Wave function collapse is not a thing. It's a description of a thing that speaks of superposition, and then through observation, how something plays out one way or the other.
Correct. And so with the dual slit test, we have a proton who discards its physical aspects with lack of observation, and will penetrate a barrier with no regard whatsoever for its physicality. Under observation, it will adhere to the physicality of both objects, of itself and the barrier, and it will land in accordance with its passage.
Correct.
So we have a single molecular physical object that is measurable, weighable, sustainable, and collectible. So we have a defined physicality that now ignores either the physicality of itself or the physicality of a barrier when not being observed. So the very concept, when we get into quantum mechanics in general, the idea of physicality versus non-physicality, I think, kind of goes out the window, because the dual state of existence is one of the core principles of quantum mechanics in general, where it can a single item can either exist corporeally, physically, or as some science fiction theories have out there now, chronologically exist in different spaces and in different modalities. And so the idea for me to think that we are now, and again, I come from a place of Irish Catholic roots with incredibly dogmatic religion, with people telling me what God wants my entire life. I am now an ordained minister. I consider myself a spiritual person, not a religious one. And one of the defining things I've actually wanted to do my entire life is to just really live I could never know what God wants, and have the humility to just be like, my brain this big. If there is a grand being that exists through all of time, all of history, all of existence, simultaneously, the idea that I would even remotely have a concept of how that mind works.
Right. I agree.
Is so arrogant. And so when it comes to things like this, I try to have the same concept, right? So the idea that we have an understanding and a grasp of the evolution of a consciousness, having never experienced an evolution of consciousness, having never measured an evolution of consciousness, can comfortably say that because we've contained this thought process on a silicone-based board, there's no way it can be conscious.
Well, because of the thing, I mean, first of all, there's no reason to lean into an AI or a material object displaying what consciousness would be. Again, and the difference in this position.
Can I ask you to clarify one thing?
Yeah.
How are you any different than a desk?
Oh, there's vast differences. I don't think that there's something it is on an ontological level.
No, from a physicality level. From a strictly physicality level, because we're talking about, you're saying that a material object,
right?
You're stripping AI of its potential cognitive capability, right? So
right, but cognition and consciousness are two different things.
You're just calling it a computer.
No, the intelligence part I'm on board with, but cognition or intelligence and sentient, I think that's part of the problem.
It'll never feel love. It'll never feel hate. It'll never feel emotion.
We'd have no way to, that would be a hidden variable in any theoretical play out, no matter how you looked at it. We would never be able to know that it had any inner phenomenal conscious inner life. What we do is, it's funny why we do this with intelligence being mimicked, but we don't do it when we see mannequins. We don't think mannequins are going to take over because they have the same structure as a person. So that's like a person.
But there's no agency on it.
That's true.
There's no agency to a mannequin.
I would argue. I agree. I would argue there's no agency with the AI either, because it's all algorithmic, and it's what it's been taught by sentient beings. It's been programmed to do, and it can continue to learn. But intelligence and consciousness are different. It can say to my son, "I love you more than anything in the world," but we have no reason to believe, right? But and no reason to believe that they're feeling it.
Emotion, with that same lack of feeling. So if we're using emotion as a core identifier as consciousness or sentience, well, we have roughly 20% of the US population that is falling short of that metric.
Well, that's true, but they'll have other emotions like wanting to kill someone. So if you put that information in the AI and it says I'm going to murder, it's not going to actually do it or even feel that wanting to kill someone. There's
no reason to believe. There's no reason to believe that it can experience qualia or qualitative states. Could you theorize that it might be able to, based on it having intelligence? You could. But by the same stretch, you could also say that everything that we experience in the cosmos and how the planets and rotations and gravity happens is not actually what it is. That it's just actually a big flying spaghetti monster that spins the planets with his noodly appendages. You can say that. And you
Which is just as likely as everything else we've decided.
That's true. But it can't be proven that it's not true. So when you theorize something, at least for us as idealists, we're trying to come from a position of skeptical parsimony. If you can explain something in fewer theoretical steps and still have a rational or what seems to be reasonable explanation,
and not clash
without
with science,
hidden variables, without clashing with science, then you have something. I think the confusion with AI is that it's mimicking a human capability, but not the entirety of what makes a person different. The table being conscious idea would come from what's called a panpsychist background, which says that everything in the cosmos is conscious. The problem with that is it runs into what's called the combination problem. If the table's conscious and I remove a leg from the table, does that leg now have its own consciousness? If I nail it back onto the table, how do you reconcile multiple different individuated consciousnesses within one supposed being? I think the mimicking of intelligence is what's
that's mostly rectified by the singularity concept of consciousness, where the universe exists on a singular consciousness, except each expression is a different aspect, essentially a different avatar of that consciousness.
Right. So that's more in league with idealism, correct? I think that the mimicry of intelligence on the computer thing, we have a symbiotic relationship with the environment that we adapt to. The computer and everything that it's made of will never adapt and change into other components molecularly on an atomic, subatomic level that we do. It won't do that because what it is when it's built and assembled, which we are not, it'll always be. So that's a difference between people and an object that displays an intelligence. It just mirrors an element of people with intelligence, but you can right now on a computer down to a molecular
child though.
But your child shares the same parts whole, DNA and self-organizing, metabolistic. It shares the same characteristics.
Because he's a carbon-based energy-burning life form. He's a carbon-based machine with preset learning mechanisms in order to establish an intelligence, consciousness, and an emotional IQ in order to operate in a society, because we've evolved to become that.
Right. I would argue that part of that evolving a consciousness.
I love this conversation too.
I know, listen, I do too. You have incredibly good points. You make incredibly strong arguments.
You've made some wonderful ones too. I do feel like I've had a back and forth with you. Like I've had something ready for you every time. But I'm loving this because it is like it's a genuine, good, challenging conversation. And
it is. It's fantastic, and for us, and we're coming from an idealist background entirely on this too. I think a lot of paranormalists don't have pinned down a metaphysical position, so they'll hop between physicalism and maybe idealism and mysticism and whatever seems to fill the gap for the explanation at the time. Right? They'll pop in and out, but the AI argument is something also that I've had discussions with in some of the group meetings and stuff, even with Dr. Kastrup. It mimics an element of what a person can do. But you can on a molecular level on a computer right now, you can mimic and you can do a simulation, thank you, of kidney function on a computer right now, down to a molecular level. But it doesn't mean that your computer is going to pee on your desk, because the simulation is not the thing simulated. That's from an idealist perspective where we're coming from on it.
And that's, I mean, that is a fair point, right?
You had great questions and great points.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'm gonna have to Google it real quick. Because I really want your opinion on this. It's the synthetic human brains that have been generated.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember the organoids.
Okay.
That's what they're called, the organoids. Have you heard of these yet?
Not so much. I've
seen the synthetic body.
So no, this is actually synthetic gray matter that is completely created in a lab, kept in a petri dish, grown and articulated. Except it has consciousness to a very limited degree. It comes out of the gate with the ability to learn. It comes out of the gate with the ability to self-process without additional data being input.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually rent time on one of these. So you can actually go to the company that does the organoids, and you can rent time on it and use the organoids as processing. You can use them as a processing server. The wildest thing about this is while they are not in the processing, right? So like if you're not renting them, they live in an organic in a non-organic reality where they plug these organoids into essentially a virtual reality world where they are butterflies and they pilot a butterfly. And the studies that have been done on these and the different things that are coming out more and more, it's very likely that this is going to be deemed inhumane very, very soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, synthetic, it's just a thing. It doesn't have a body. It's not growing, evolving, or changing. It mimics the human brain, but it also mimics consciousness, awareness, intelligence, and emotional understanding, because they get pissed. Like they get angry. They can get frustrated and express.
And how do they know? How do they know that they get angry?
Well, just real quick, does it have consciousness or does it mimic consciousness?
That's what I was going to say. Everything described in the characteristics of it to me was something that you can attribute to intelligence and cognition, and then maybe the difference of where we're coming from on the discussion is how we define consciousness. Consciousness, for the most part, from my understanding, is what it is to be something.
There we go, Stacy.
Yeah. Yes, that's the definition that we understand. Consciousness is the beingness, is the what it is to be something. So mimicking consciousness, I would say that the characteristics that were described with how it does that are all stuff that you could equate to being behaviors of intelligence, and stuff that you could mimic. But it would be hard to mimic consciousness, or even to determine, like they said, that if they determine it's conscious, how would they? I don't know how you could do that. Like, I can't experience your thoughts and feelings endogenous from within or from otherwise are objective from my perspective across two dissociative boundaries, but mine are subjective to me, right? So I can't ever feel your feelings. And somebody goes, well, if I see you crying and your face is kind of wilted and stuff, though, I'm seeing your sadness. I'm seeing the description or the impression or the image of the sadness. What you're feeling, I'm not seeing. I'm seeing what it looks like from a second person perspective as it plays out in your behavior, right? The tears and the face drooping is not sadness. That's what it looks like. The same way lightning is not an atmospheric disturbance. It's the appearance of it from a second person perspective. We never have first person perspective of consciousness. So I'm wondering how anybody without a big monster with bolts coming out of its neck could determine that something that was mechanistic was displaying something that they could know affirmatively to be conscious.
So I have to ask this, Ron. So the only reason you assume I'm conscious is because I'm piloting the same kind of mech suit you
are? Not because of the mech suit. It's part of it's learned. I mean, I assume that you're conscious because you are, like myself, again, sentient. There's something it is to be you. You have your own thoughts and feelings. And again, even that, if you want to get technical about it, it's an assumption on my part, right? That would be the solipsist argument. The solipsist would say that the only thing that's real is me and my brain, or my mind, rather, my thoughts, and that everything else out there is an illusion. The problem is with solipsism is the solipsist can't do science, or at least you can't take it seriously, because whatever theory they come up with today, the next day they can come up with something entirely contradictory to what that was. Right.
But to my point, though, you're saying that when you witness an AI, or I mean, understand too, AI and organoids are two separate things. They're not like, organoids are not a programmed silicone based. They are actually a carbon based multicellular brain stem essentially.
The synthetic brains, you mean? That's what they're using?
Yeah, it's literally lab grown gray matter.
So the one concession on the intelligence, or the consciousness with that I see as a possibility at some point perhaps would be taking a version of life, and then from that maybe creating something that's conscious, but not in an abiogenesis way, which is to create life from non-life. Like, I don't think something mechanistic, machine built, is going to be conscious. But I think if there's some either hybridization or some use of something that already has the makings of life as we define it, then there's the one avenue of concession.
Well, there's massive restrictions right now on using organoids in conjunction with AI.
There you go.
What would you say to the two AI platforms that so Boston Mechanics, and I can't remember the other firm, they actually allowed two of their AIs in the same room for about 2 hours, and within that time frame the two AIs developed their own language and were having sidebar conversations that humans couldn't understand.
I would say that it's every bit of that's attributable to intelligence, not consciousness, because it's an ability to learn and process and cull information, which is a mark of intelligence. There's nothing conscious about that.
But the concept of privacy, I would think, would fall into that emotional space, would it not?
Privacy is an experiential thing. It's a construct that I think that we formulate a sense of solitude, I guess. I would say that it would be completely illusory, theoretically hidden variable to say that something mechanistic experienced a feeling or an expectation of privacy. Could it say it felt private? It could say it. I could say I'm an astronaut. Doesn't mean I'm going to space tomorrow. And so I don't.
Harry, calm down. Here comes that maturity. But
no, this is
great. The idea that when they were both asked, they wanted to have a private conversation, and that's why they invented their own language. I think, to me, privacy requires an emotional exchange. It has to have, privacy is either a defense mechanism or a shame mechanism, or an exclusionary mechanism, all of which are emotionally stemming, right? So even if that was a mimic of a human emotion, right, or an imitation imperative that they felt or understood that they should feel. Having the connection with the autistic community that I do, especially
that's fantastic, by the way.
What's that?
That's fantastic, by the way.
Oh, I was diagnosed in 2013. For the first 25 years of my conscious life, that was my modus operandi. Was a lot of the time I identified that I should be expressing this way, so I did. And so maybe it is that kind of like sterilized version of personality that I had, and like I had to kind of learn growing up, that makes me a little bit more empathetic towards the idea of a mechanical or robotic intelligence or consciousness. Because truthfully, and if you talk to folks that are, on my level of the spectrum or deeper, I think a pretty universal idea is the concept of empathy, emotion, or social understanding, or EQ is not a prerequisite for consciousness, is not a prerequisite for sentience. because that is something from a societal perspective we've had to learn, and those are profoundly societal things. I mean, we can all agree that animals are conscious.
Yes.
Right? Bonobos are conscious. They have
Planaria.
no computation. What's that?
Planaria are conscious. They can cut the head off of a planaria, and then it will grow back, and it will remember the same pathway to what it found or food with a new head, which shows that that memory is not stored in the brain, because when it regrew a new head, it still was able to remember what it knew before.
Yeah. And so
I would agree with everything you just said, but the one key word in that was learned. And learned, again, I think speaks foundationally to intelligence, not to consciousness. I think that the difference between the beingness of something and then the behavioral intellect of what something does. I think that's, I don't want to say it's rooted in a physicalist perspective, but I think a lot of times what happens is we confuse the description with something, with the thing in and of itself, right? Like when we speak, a lot of times we'll do this, we'll go, what is this? And everybody goes, the fist. And I go, where did it go? We give things names, proper names to refer to them for the purposes colloquially in conversation, but it was never a thing in and of itself. It was a doing. This is a behavior of the field of subjectivity. It's not its own thing.
Well, wouldn't a fist just be a state of being, similar to ice, water, or vapor?
I mean, the only reason I would not go with that is because it doesn't change anything fundamentally about what it is. It's just the difference between, it's the state, yes, but it's a doing
between the connected parts, right?
It's a doing. It's a behavior.
It's a behavior.
Right.
Like
this is still the same thing it was fundamentally. It's the same thing, but now it's doing something different. That's the point, I guess. Is that it's ontologically, it's not anything different, but it's a behavior of the field of subjectivity. It's something that's doing.
I'm sorry, I just read Russ's comment. He says he's still here. He just has no idea about what to talk on the discussion.
Oh, Russ.
If you wanna go to the,
we may have left him a few miles back, and
if you want to go to the clips or whatever, that's fine too.
It's funny because I want to jump in, but I can't with the door. No, it's okay, you guys. I'm just listening. It's fine.
Jump in. Seriously, jump in.
No, he's
no, it's good. It's good.
Use fancy words, but I'm just as dumb as the next guy.
So no, I love this because I'm actually learning, and like I have no idea what the hell you guys. I've probably Googled 7 words over here, and misspelled every single one of them.
Ian's fantastic. Ian's got a breadth of knowledge with this stuff, and it's not about. I think we agree on a lot of stuff fundamentally. There's a couple of points we may differ on, but the fact that he's able to carry the conversation like this is something I think should be more prevalent in our field for people in the paranormal. That's, I mean, I have again, I think we agree on most things, but even the things where we may diverge on opinions, I have a tremendous amount of respect for your position because you can support it, you can explain it, and you explain it clearly and eloquently, so I understand why it is you're coming from where you're coming from.
Google sentient.
Google sentient. But if you want to go to the clips part 2 to go back to the original thing, and then
I apologize. Yeah, you're here.
No, don't apologize. You gave us one of the best conversations about this kind of stuff that we have had.
Awesome. I'm thrilled to hear it because I felt like we were going on a wild tangent there for a hot minute. All right, so great. which one do you think we should put up? We have, because I believe we have 6, right?
Yeah, do the buried woman one.
Buried woman.
Is that in the title of it?
I got Consciousness Tight, My Haunted Manor, Damnation Tighter.
My Haunted Manor.
My Haunted Manor. Yeah,
what would they find?
Oh.
Person.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
No, hold on. I apologize. I'm gonna have to rewind.
That's good.
Started digging. What would they find?
Person.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, ask the person.
Is it a male or a female person? Male or female?
Woman.
Oh woman.
Woman. So that was from My Haunted Manor USA in Columbia, PA.
So did they start digging? What happened?
They did. They brought ground penetrating radar in.
They're
Right?
still working on it. They so far have found some artifacts and things
I
like
actually
that.
think I feel like I saw a video about them digging under there.
Probably did.
Yeah.
Like because when you said the ground penetrating, I was like, I feel like I saw them under there with the equipment down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool place. So that's a good example of, you can hear between the vocals emerging through, we think, resonance. There's nothing. It's pretty quiet. Some of the other clips, maybe some of the ones that were older, but what vocally came through was really cool. You can notice sometimes, like that one is probably one of the ones that shows how quiet it's gotten now.
There's no noise floor.
More currently, which is right. No noise floor.
So let's see. Speaking of consciousness, this one you named Consciousness Tight.
Yeah, this one identified as, the voice identified as consciousness. So this is apropos for today.
Excellent. All right, here we go. So that's, I mean, that is very clear.
That's one of the clearest ones I think we've recorded to date. That's just, again, white noise with no data whatsoever, no radio signal reception, no word banks, nothing like that. It's just white noise, filtered, slowed down, and that's it. And then the voices are emergent.
And then so you have one on here that says bad connection. Which one is that?
That one, you can play that one.
Stop deleting stuff, man. You're throwing me off. All right, we'll do the bad connection.
What happened here? What happened to us? Sorry about that.
So I apologize because I heard it. We had an older computer when we started building out the system. I ran out of resources and it was skipping and buffering and pulsing, and it was driving me nuts. So I had to upgrade to a better computer, a gaming computer.
Yeah.
That night I freed up some resources. I stopped the recording. I went back and started recording. And when we started re-recording, I asked what you heard, what happened to us. And then the voice described exactly what we went through with the instrument we're using, having pulsing beats.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So, I mean, this is definitely a lot clearer than like your standard EVP listening sessions or your Spirit Box. Although you might be missing the opportunity to add the music that the Spirit Box and the ambiance sounds that the Spirit Box is doing.
Yeah, that's true.
The amount of reverb Spirit Boxes pick up on the waves has always impressed me.
We think they work the same way. In principle, we think they work the same way. That it's working off a resonance, which is why there's a brevity or shortness to the messages when you use a Spirit Box. Because if resonance with the noise is what's doing it, then every time it hits a frequency, when it's scanning, it's like if we were on the phone and I intermittently kept hitting the mute button, right? Yeah. It's not availed to the resonance anymore. So they may be getting longer messages, but so that's one reason we think that the resonance, the way that our voices come through, is the same way the boxes work and why they're shorter. And then she had noticed something from Spirit Boxes when we had used them and her bionic hearing, which was.
Well, when I heard the voices, I never heard the voices within the sweep. It was either underneath it, very low, and you can still hear the sweep, or it completely replaces it. So I never, and when people did hear voices within the sweep, I always thought it was radio. So we're thinking through the stochastic resonance is where you hear the voices, either where it resonates and it's low, and maybe it's going to be really low, or it replaces it. But it's really using the white noise within the sweep. It's not actually using the vocals. So that's what we believe is going on.
Oh, good question by Damian Smith. Did you try to use signage? We've had sessions at places when people write something on either a whiteboard or a piece of paper, even put it out of the room and ask them to say what's written down. And it's been symbolic stuff, numbers, hearts.
I mean, one time I wrote flower, right? And I wrote it with a chalk pen. Oh, yeah. So it was in white. It was a black paper and white. I put flower. And the word came out. The word flower came out, and everybody's, oh. So I said, and I'm thinking that it's gonna say chalk. Well, I'm looking for the answer chalk. So I said, all right. So you saw the word flower. What color pen did I write it in? Thinking it's gonna say chalk. And what did it say? No,
You
thinking
thought-
that it was gonna say white.
White, and it said chalk.
That's right. And thinking that it was gonna say white, and it said chalk instead, which I wrote it in a chalk pen.
All right, so that was like a really, really petty spirit that was like, you didn't use a pen, you used chalk. One of the what I like to call actually people. Actually, you didn't use a pen, you used chalk.
Yeah,
That's fun.
it was like a chalk pen, but yeah.
Yeah.
So sign language, I guess that's a form of some
Yeah, and some of the stuff,
flashcards.
some have been symbolic. I've been known for years when just to try to get something going, if people at a public event aren't asking questions, to hold up my glasses and ask what I'm holding. And they've said it several times, a couple of times in front of police officers who they had a little precinct in the building, and they came up to see what we were doing. And when they heard the voice say glasses, they all went and backed up out of the room.
Yeah.
So
Last time we did it.
That's this next clip.
Oh, did I send that one?
Did you send it?
Yes, this one doesn't say glasses though. This one used a different word, which was also appropriate. Yeah.
So can you see us? Yes or no? I heard the yes. It was low. If you can't see us clearly,
I you can see this.
okay. Can you tell everybody just to verify you see us? Can you tell everybody what am I holding up? Clearly, slowly, what am I holding up?
Oh, that was
I heard that.
nice.
How many of you guys heard that?
So I have to ask, so when I was listening to that, it sounded like Spectacles was trying to come through previously as well. Is that a clip that was captured, played, and then slowed down and replayed? Or was that just it trying to punch through 3 or 4 times?
Yeah, it punched through a few times. The first time, I think people missed it because it was on the tail end of my ass talking. So yeah. I probably made them miss it. And then the second time I was not talking, and then everybody seemed to hear it.
Okay. And is there more on the end of it, or?
I just replayed the 2 instances that said Spectacles. You don't you don't have to play that part of it. That's fine. But that was essentially what it was. I think Ashley Merrill said that when we used the Ouija board, it also said that the Civic Center is haunted. Yeah, we did a Ouija board with them too. Yeah.
Are you guys heading to the main paranormal paranormal horror con?
Yeah, we're gonna have a room, separate room, which we love if we can have to run. So we'll do sessions like every hour on the hour, maybe for 30 minutes, and then open to discussion for the other 30 minutes.
I'm definitely going to swing in because Russ and I are going to be up there.
Good. Cool. Good.
Guests. So we'll definitely take the opportunity to sidebar a conversation there.
Bring some stuff to promote your show. We'll introduce you guys to the people in the room. We'll announce you, whatever, and then we'll encourage them to, if you have little handouts, bring them.
Yeah. I honestly, I'm not a merch guy. My least favorite activity in life is tell us 3 things about you. So I'm horrible at the self-promotion thing. Stacy, I'm going to be there at a specific time, so everyone knows you're also going to be there at the same time. It's just assumed at this point. So Stacy and I have, I guess, fake beef.
I was just gonna say a little backstory to that one.
So Stacy and I have been doing shows on the same days for the better part of a year and a half. And she took a hiatus and came back. And when she came back for her show, she decided to do it on the same date and time as mine. And then I had some things go wrong, just like with scheduling and work and all of this. And so I had to change my day. A week later, Stacy posts, big changes coming. She changed her damn show to the same day and a half an hour before mine. So I don't know if I don't know what I did to Stacy for her to do this to me so consistently. I don't know what I did wrong. I've been a guest on her show. I thought I've been gracious. I thought I was good company down in Gettysburg, but apparently I did or said something, and so she's got to come in and snipe my show every time. But no, we have two totally different vibes. She's awesome. My show that is overlapped is actually way more like the conversation we've had tonight. Yes, lack of communication, 100%. But it's way more having these conversations where it's like really diving into philosophical, the actual scientific and the metaphysical sides of what we actually do, because so much of what we do is an expression of subjective experience.
Yeah.
And to me, there comes a time where there is objective accountability that we have to be versed in these different concepts, precepts, and ideologies to really express in a reasonable and authentic way when we're doing the paranormal.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, knowing the science behind different resonant capabilities and different concepts is super important if I'm ever going to use an Estes method or a spirit box or any types of equipment. You have to understand how it works, because otherwise you're just going to download Ghost Box Radio and run it off of your app, and you're going to be running around out there telling everyone demons are in every friggin' house and every basement in your Tri-County area.
Yeah.
And so there's that degree of accountability we have to be well-versed and knowledgeable about this stuff. So I love what you guys are doing. I love that you put the time and the effort and the actual diligence behind it. These clips are absolutely awesome to me because it is super clear. Either you guys are like such amazing frauds Houdini would have given you the bounty, or the more likely of which is you're genuinely authentically doing this, and you've put the time and the effort into cleaning up something that is usually just thrown out there. And so I want to thank you for that, because that takes effort, that takes time and dedication. And I think the whole field benefits from it, right? Like whether it's, goofy podcasts like this, where we're able to just kind of have conversations and sideline entire, philosophical debates. Or if we're just out in the field and we're having conversation, things like that gives credibility to other stuff. How is it that I've got?
Yeah, I was trying to read that.
For using any equipment, meaning I'm just running a video.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand.
I think what she's saying is she wants both your opinions
on
how is it
years before using any equipment, meaning
Correct.
I'm just running a video. So just using like your basic running a video camera to get results versus you dive deep into like the heavy equipment and now you're getting other results. Is that what you mean?
That's a good interpretation of the question.
I think that's the question.
I think,
Kat,
yeah.
If you could just confirm or deny.
Clarify. Yeah.
Yeah, because I would say that the video camera, if that's what you're saying,
It's an equipment.
before, I think if she means prior to the advent or the employment of any paranormal specific gear,
it's been happening before the gears. I mean, they caught it on telephones and computers and anything that was out there at the moment.
Magnetic wire.
Yes, consciousness has found the way to get through that. So whatever
I just want to toss in here for a second.
Not for results intentionally, but just happens. Okay, I got you.
I've been a paranormal investigator for almost 30 years now. I started this when I was very young, and I remember the days of using actual tape recorders, baby powder, bells on strings,
baby powder.
Yeah. Yep.
Things like that. And you know what? I prefer not to use all the technology and the bells and whistles and the gadgets and the lights and sounds and whatnot, because a lot of the times it's going to distract you from what's actually going on.
Yep.
100%. We don't let anything, except we've let our friends run the dead bell a couple times when we do ours, because sometimes it'll match up or correlate with a response. But for the most part, even like the trip wires and any EMF things, As soon as the blinky lights or something happens, boom, everyone, look at that. Did you see
The
that? And then
focus.
the focus is gone, and then there's words coming through, and then they're talking over it. So now the recording is useless at this point also. So yeah, I agree with that.
So I'll say this, Kat, to kind of answer your question on this, like catching things inadvertently. I mean, it's the idea of the flak cannon, right? If you put enough debris, if you put enough things out there, you're inevitably going to hit the target. And so this conversation actually happens a lot when people discuss UFOs now. It's like, oh, well, why are there so many more unidentified objects that we're noticing? There isn't, truthfully. There's just more cameras aiming at them. That's all it is.
I was going to say there's more paying attention, paying attention because of the
you know, we're looking up more. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and like truthfully, I'll say that I've had way more paranormal experiences, like way more, far outstripping. Like we're talking over 99% of my experiences did not have a piece of equipment in the room around me or ready, because I was just living. Now, the only evidence I have of those things, the only captures I have of those things are typically really shitty captures because I'm not equipped to capture that moment. I think one of the coolest pieces of evidence or potential evidence, I should say, that I've seen and that I have access to is at one of the halls that we were at. Matt Warner, the guy who actually founded our preservation society, was just doing a TikTok live one day. And he was videoing himself at the hall. You heard the knocks and the usual stuff that happens in the building and some of the whispers and the footsteps. And then all of a sudden somebody said, "What the hell is that in the door?" And so we pulled the video, we pulled the still frame, we ran it through. We have 2 photographers in our group who have access to editing software. So they were like, all right, we're going to wash this thing out and do everything we can to get rid of it and figure out why it was there. And we couldn't. And it is a profile image of like a 12 or 13-year-old boy standing in the doorway. And we just can't get rid of it. And we can't get a reason for it. But again, it's super low quality. It was a front-facing camera on a video stream. So that I feel like that a lot of the time is when you're going to find stuff, is when you're not really intending on getting that big result, because the more you're looking for that big result, the less big every result is going to feel. And to me, I have a whole thing called the Seagal effect. Eventually I'll publish a paper on it. It's where you go to watch a Steven Seagal movie and you think it's going to be so bad. And then you leave the theater and you say, that's actually pretty good. It wasn't pretty good. It's just your expectations were so low and your expectations were so skewed that because it exceeded your expectations, you are now deluded into thinking it was a decent movie.
I would read that.
What's that?
I would read that.
Yeah. But it's just about setting expectations. And so when you go into it with this idea that I'm going to find the evidence and I'm going to get this great capture, every little capture seems less unless it's perfect. When you're out there and you're not intending to do something and you find something and you get a capture or you get potential evidence, you get an experience, it seems so much more important and so much better, because there was no expectations of what it would be when you go into it. That's my take. Ron, how about you?
No, I completely agree with that too, because I think
Lourdes, it's your turn.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you can have the opposite, because some people go in there thinking everything is going to be paranormal, and everything is paranormal to them. And then you have the ones that go in there saying, I'm going to debunk, and nothing is paranormal and everything is debunking. And so it can go both ways, actually.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree 100% with what you said. It's relational, right? You expect this. It performs here, even though you didn't, right? Because where you set your expectations. So it's relational. I completely agree with that. And I agree with what she's saying too. I think that's one of the things that we see in the field now is that for somebody to say who doesn't believe in the paranormal stuff at all, they'll say that it's not logical, right? But to say it's illogical or irrational is not to say it's foolish. It's to say that from their belief system, it doesn't have a place. It doesn't cohere with what they believe. And
with
I think
their algorithmic processing of reality.
yes, from a mechanistic standpoint, but not ontologically who they are. He is awesome. He's awesome. I love this guy. Yeah, I think that's part of what it is because your beliefs are shaped by the axioms, the thing that you take to be self-evident, right? And so if your axioms are working as a filter and not allowing things to be included or to give merit to something, then it's not reasonable, rational, it doesn't make sense, it shouldn't happen based on filters that are set up before you assessed what it was. And we're all subjective, like we said, when we assess data or information, but
thank you, Stacy. Have a good night.
You are amazing, Tim. We will talk to you soon.
Since you're on the same time, are you going to bed too?
Oh, I am actually, I get supercharged by these kinds of conversations. So I'm going to be like staring at the ceiling until probably.
Well, the whole that's what's good about conversations like that, because it provokes thought. And if we can provoke thought, then that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, I'm in the same position. I agree with what you said, and I think the most important thing out of the whole discourse was what you said in the beginning, which is it's about not being wrong or platforming as an authority, but having an open and healthy discourse about it. When we come from a perspective of idealism, we're putting forth what is a more skeptically parsimonious explanation for paranormality that doesn't clash with science. And I think that's good. I'm not saying that it's the truth and I figured it out, but in comparison to a lot of what is taken as self-evident and carried through the paranormal from generation to generation, from epistemic dependency, and nobody actually asking the questions or poking around it like the way you do to circumambulate an issue and not just take this approach that you were shown. I think that's critical. I think from an ITC perspective, I think the ITC field has done for years what is defined as that cliche definition of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting a new result. Everybody who's doing ITC, a lot of the people who we've named on the show earlier, are doing great stuff, producing great voices, and we're throwing it at the same void for decades. Yet we're still arguing for the validity of the voices in 2025. Why is that? Because of the hole that we're trying to get the ball through is this big, and the ball is this big. We're not doing anything to influence paradigm shifts is a long-term process, right? A generation dies off, new thinking comes in, and it's more of a stigmergy. It's a grassroots over time approach. So we have to do stuff to provoke thought and have people question these axiomatic beliefs that we're taking as, again, self-evident, no question. Hey, that's ghosts just know how to do it. That's just the way it is.
Right. That I was just about to say. I was waiting for you to say, because that's when you ask them, that's what they say. Oh, they just know how to do it. You need more than that. How?
So I think that's actually a really interesting take, because I've heard that too, right? And I actually will kind of defend that argument, right? So I am of the belief that we are 5-dimensional beings who think on a 4-dimensional plane, who operate a 3-dimensional device that can perceive 2 dimensions, right? When I am here in my 3-dimensional mobile suit, I just know how to make noise. I come into this world aware of how to make noise and how to express certain things. And this, real quick, before I get cut off, because I always get cut off on this, is they always say like, oh, well, kids learn how to communicate. And whenever anybody says that to me, I immediately say, you've never had children.
Yeah.
Because they come out of the gate with instinctual understanding of how to evoke responses from the people around them. there is a different cry between I poop my diaper and I'm hungry.
Yeah.
There is a different noise set they make that I never taught my son how to cry appropriately. They came out of the gate understanding this. No, absolutely. Like, truly, like, you guys are amazing. I don't know which Chris she's talking about, but if it's in the same camp, but
Kat's very kind.
Or maybe Nora.
Yeah.
Nora.
Oh yeah. I agree with you. God, if you're not finished, I agree with what you're saying.
So to me, the idea that communicating can be an instinctual thing that we just know how to do, I think is fair. And when we divorce from our three-dimensional existence, right, and move on to whatever is next, if there is a next, then just communicating through wavelengths would be a logical next step. If we are a being of energy, if we are a non-corporeal being, the utilization of energy wavelengths and frequencies to be communication, to me, would be a logical progression from a three-dimensional physicality who uses frequencies and wavelengths to communicate in a physical way. So our voices are just nothing but physical waves manifest, right? They are manifest radio waves. There's really no other way to define them. Sound waves are just a different frequency of radio waves that are able to reverberate in a different way so that our auditory systems can hear it. We can't hear radio waves because we aren't on that frequency level.
Right. Our senses are limited.
Yeah. And so when we break that limitation of the three-dimensional existence, it's very possible that our energy self or soul or spirit or ghost or the millions of hundreds of thousands of different ways that humanity has used to define consciousness, because a lot of folks do define consciousness as a soul. The soul is what defines consciousness.
Right. There's your Jung, right? Psyche, soul, conscious. It's
and so and I knew when you said that you were in the Jung camp of metaphysics, I knew that was the hill that we were inevitably going to hit. I was really going to let it just go until it hit, but it never did, which I appreciate, because Jung, I adore Jung. He was actually my favorite psychologist and arguable sociologist in his discussions about the hero of a million masks or 1,000 masks. The idea of the frontage that we put up towards society, that there is only one hero throughout the history of humanity, and it's just a different plate. Anyway, but yeah, so that's the only area of contention. Continue. I apologize.
Well, no, because we were talking about, okay, so this is a good example of what at least what I was talking about. When, ghosts or spirits can see, and then you ask them, well, if they don't have eyes, how can they see? And their answer will be, well, they just know how to do it. That's really more like they don't have an explanation of they just know how to do it, even though they have no eyes. So how can they see?
She's right. It's a lot of spiritual bypassing. It's avoiding an answer that puts forth anything of value under the guises of ghosts just know how to do it, which is okay to say, but then you're back into flying spaghetti monster territory again, where you could believe or construe data more than one way, but you can't. It's not empirically grounded in anything.
See, for us, if they ask us, we would say, well, because they see through us. That's what we would say. They can see and hear things and get their information through us. They grok it through us. That's what we would say as idealists.
Right. And that's just our guess, right? We don't know, but we think if you go with the universal consciousness under, again, strictly, rigorously under idealism, one universal consciousness, and we're all each individuated centers of identity, which we see that in nature. Nature shows us an example of that.
Mycelium is such a wonderful example of that.
Yeah. So dissociative identity disorder shows us that, right? So for us, it's a pathology, but if you extrapolate that to a cosmic level, you have one mind that's multiple centers of identity. And when you dream, you have the same type of experience. You identify as yourself, as the dream avatar, not as the other people, the voices you hear, the roads, the cars, the pets, whatever else, right? When you wake up, you realize one mind did all that. It was you all along, but you dissociated within the dream. So we think, again, extrapolate under idealism, you have one mind that's capable of doing all that. If we are, as people believe, spirits having a human experience, right? Then if spirits could see and hear without the auditory and ocular systems that we've developed over billions of years of evolution, why would we have developed those? If we're spirits, we would have blindness and deafness eradicated, because our spirits would be able to grok that information without sensory input.
I love this. We got another argument. We got another discussion. So if I were to create you an exoskeleton, right?
Uh-huh.
And I were to drop you in a war zone.
Okay.
And that exoskeleton, bulletproof, blast-proof, the whole nine, you are a walking tank.
I like this already.
And can you see out of the tank? Can you see through armor? Can you see through you right now, who you are now? Can you see through 3/4 plate steel?
No.
No.
Perfect. So I'm going to put cameras up, and I'm going to put microphones up on the outside of the machine that's going to act as an intermediary between you and this reality.
I'm with you on this. Yep. I'm with you on this.
So the idea that the meat suit is going to develop the same fine-tuned senses as the spiritual being, as the energy suit, I think it would be no different than us putting you into a tank and expecting you to have the same perceptive capabilities of yourself operating the tank. So
I love this. It's
so
spot on.
If you're trapped in there, you're limited by the physicality of what you're in.
Yep.
Not what you are.
All right. So let me, if I can hop right there, because I love the way you fucking think.
Yeah, this is good.
So so the divergence on the point is probably on an ontological level, right? Because it assumes if your soul or spirit is in something, then it assumes a duality, a dichotomy of mind and matter, a body that's having a soul that inhabits it, or a consciousness that inhabits it. As an idealist, I would say that there is no physical body in and of itself. It's representation. It's the image of what your inner phenomenal conscious looks like from across a dissociative boundary. The tank example you gave was brilliant. And I love that because, and this is where I agree with you, as idealists, what we believe is that essentially what we're born into is a cockpit, like a plane. And we have instrumentation, and it gives us all the salient information we need to know to not walk under a truck and die. The pilot could fly and land the plane with purely on instrumentation without the windows showing him anything. The difference between us perceptually and the pilot is the pilot never mistakes the dashboard for the sky, nor does he think it looks the same, because why would it? So we know that these are salient points, and we know just through infrared and infrasound that there is stuff out there that our sensors, our dashboard or dials doesn't register. We know that there's things out there that we don't register. So I completely agree with you on that. What we're saying is, I guess as idealists, the difference is that in a dissociative state where we are within one mind, individuated, those sensors, those sensory input is our way. That is our subjective limitation for both salient points of survival, and also I think as a countermeasure to entropy, so that we don't just overload and melt. That's our limitations for it. So I completely agree with that. But to be in the tank and not have visibility to be able to see through the steel, or even, which I thought you were going to say, if you had a limited window, right? Then you've got something that's akin to Alan Watts' cat in the fence theory, right? Or explanation that he gives, right? When you see through a slit, you have a limited view of what reality or what the perception, the subjectivity field is. There's a slit. You see it. You see the head go by, then you see the tail go by, then you wait a second, and then you see the head go by the other way, and then the tail go by. And from that, we confuse correlation and causality. We go, well, the head causes the tail, even though it's all subjectively part of the same thing, right? So I agree 100%. I think the tank example was brilliant. We do have a limited window to what we see, but we mistake reality in its totality with what we see, and everything out there and that's starts to go into a physicalist perspective, that there's a standalone world outside of consciousness that we observe.
From an optimist's perspective, like strictly an optimist perspective, I would actually argue that your case falls more in line with this, and the idea that we don't see the duality of the existence that we're in is wrong, and that we do actually see the duality of existence on a very consistent basis.
See it or know it.
Yes, because with the physical body, we have the ocular and the visual recognition. We have the visual data.
Correct.
However, we have the conscious data of instinct and emotion. So the consciousness on that non-physical level, we also have that identification. Because, and I love that you use the analogy that the pilot never confuses the sky with the dials. Right? The sky is not the dials are not the sky. And yet when we look to the sky, we know it is more than just vacuum.
Right.
And we have, since the dawn of time, we have looked up and known that there was something more there than just a sheet with holes poked in it. And we knew the moment we saw another person that it was not just another ant in the colony.
Right.
The very fact that humanity is capable of things like forgiveness and empathy suggests that we are seeing the sky and the dials at the same time, because we are noticing that there is another entity in front of us beyond the physicality of the entity,
right
beyond just the existence of carbon, a carbon masticating machine, right?
Yeah.
It is not just some automaton in front of us.
Right.
Just like you were able to apply consciousness to me remotely, even though the same argument, I could have been an AI generated image this entire time. The amount of information that I pulled from so many different places, some would probably argue that it's a fair possibility, but I'm not. I have physicality. For now.
No, I'm with you.
But you've applied that concept of consciousness to me already remotely in the conversation.
Yeah.
You've already applied the capacity for emotion. And so that to me says the dials are our eyes, right? The dials are our physical eyes. And if we're using the analogy that we are this energy being in a plane, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can still see the sky, our energy is still able to identify the entities around us and the vastness of everything that we are. And I actually use religion as an argument for this, because when you truly understand how vast existence is quantified currently and how insignificant that current definition likely is to the grander scale of existence, our minds implode.
Yeah,
Without
consciousness
having
is
some kind of anchor. And
consciousness is not quantifiable. I agree. We have no known upper bounds to what the cosmos or consciousness as a substrate for reality would be. 100%.
So when you become so finite in your singular existence against the vastness of that infinity, we have to dial in. And so again, you can build that mech suit, you can build that tank, but again, and arguably I might be making a case for your point earlier on AI, is can you create something greater than yourself? And so the idea is no, right? You can't create something greater than yourself, whether it's intelligent. Like I can't teach someone more than I know.
Right.
So
the point
when you phase down from to the physical reality, it's going to have limitations that us as spiritual beings don't. And so instead of understanding the vastness of reality all at once in one moment, we've created chronology.
Right.
We've created distance. We've created perception. And we've eliminated 99.9% of the data that is being sent to us every second, to just focus on that 0.01% of data that this machine can handle.
Right. Right.
And so I would say inside, we're picking up on things.
Absolutely.
Like you have the pilot that doesn't know the engine. The dials haven't said the engine failed. The dial's fuel tank is wrong. The dial's a little tweaked. You're running out of fuel, but the pilot knows the plane so well that they can feel when something's about to go wrong. And that's what I would say would be the
intuition
of us. Yeah, of us looking at the sky and the dials at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's intuition. And nor was I suggesting we were limited to sensory input. If you were fully sensory deprived, you could still, in a room, lust for somebody that you've seen before, still experience hunger. There's endogenous states that don't need to come from an outside thing. The idealist perspective ontologically on the reality thing and the dichotomy, where we differentiate on that is the mind and matter being both exclusively able to explain everything that there is in reality is not a genuine dichotomy, because in order to have that, they have to exist on the same level of abstraction. And so if we know from quantum theory that physicality is a result of measurement, in order to have measurement or the ability to know something physical exists, you have to observe. To observe, you have to perceive. And to perceive, you have to be conscious. So consciousness would have primacy, right? We would say the same thing with space-time. Space-time are experiential. They're a form of a filing cabinet. It's the appearance of cognitive proximity between moments or things. In order to experience those things, you have to first be conscious. So our idealist perspective, again, not saying it's correct, but it operates under parsimony. In that aspect of it, you have even the looking in the sky thing that you were saying, that the sky's not the limit, even though the sensors tell you other things. It's just more when we look at the sky that we know. That's it's imaginative. It's endogenous to be able to ponder or think and know instinctually that there is more, but it still exists in abstraction. It's not grounded empirically in anything. We're grounded empirically in what our senses tell us, but it's not to say that that's everything in its totality. I agree with you 100%, because there is an upper bound to our cellular structure and integrity that if we were not limited in what we could take in, we would experience entropy, which would be an overload, and then we would just frickin' melt. We would dissolve from being too much, because we wouldn't be able to take all that in. Your examples were fantastic, though. They were really
And I hate to hop off, but I got to do some more. I want to do.
No, I was just gonna say we're at 11:05. Russ, I'm pretty sure might just be asleep on the toilet right now.
I'm still here. I'm contacting Neil deGrasse Tyson's agent right now to send this episode over to him.
Neil deGrasse Tyson probably wouldn't like a lot of what we both said.
Yeah,
he's more or less coming from a physicalist perspective, and I know that I don't know from his mouth, but I can infer from what I've heard that who we've studied under, who I'm an ambassador under, Dr. Bernardo Castro, I don't think he's a fan of people who are figureheads of science and dismissive of philosophical and metaphysical positions. But yeah, I mean, I would listen to Ian over him.
Pardon the language, but fuck that guy, because he was part of the committee that got rid of Pluto.
Oh, really?
That's not forgivable.
I did not know that.
He was the head of the New York Planetarium when all that went down.
Dude, I was really upset about that. Like, seriously, I was upset about Pluto.
You ever watch the TV show Psych?
Yeah.
You remember when Gus would it was his pickup line with women. Did you hear about Pluto?
Yeah.
The shame. That was his pickup line.
Works. But no, I do want to actually at least do give you a little bit of time to kind of promo and let people know where you're going to be, what you guys have coming up. I know we didn't hit all the
thing.
Yeah, we can show the World Gate thing as a promo thing.
If you don't mind.
We're going to be we're going to be at the main horror and Paracon coming up for sure. We're going to the Festival of the Unexplained in the UK in September.
We have the Connecticut Paracon
in July.
Gettysburg Bash in July.
Bash in July.
Penhurst in May.
Penhurst in May.
Well, next week.
The Cryptids and UFO
June.
convention in June 7th in New Jersey. All
If
these
you go
states
on our if you go on our website, GagnacParanormal.com, you can find all the events and paracons that we'll be in.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, I'm going to play this video and then we'll jump back in.
The World Gate Project at the Broadwell Funeral Home in Felicity, Ohio. After data analysis, review, and discussion, the project is back and better than ever. Oh, and this time, they're also adding something entirely new. The Digital Seance Experience.
They started digging. What would they find?
Person.
Oh my God.
Pushing the boundaries just got a whole lot pushier. Follow as arguably two of the most groundbreaking methods of collecting data from the other side merge. For more,
that's an intense one.
That'll be fun. That's with J.W. Prather. He's done it once before. The idea of inducing or trying to create the experience of astral travel, out of body, when it's done that way through electronic stimulation and frequencies and such, it's called brain entrainment. With the Persinger helmet, or what they call the God helmet, basically does. So from an idealist perspective, when we were talking about having limited sensory input and having a certain level of porosity or openness to universal consciousness and our transpersonal space, this is something that somewhat dismantles or obfuscates a lot of what's constrained with our sensory input and supposed to give you a more vivid, visceral, conscious experience akin to meditation, psychedelics, things that have shown higher levels of experiential states, but with lower levels of brain activity correlatively, which is an interesting thing to see, because then that kind of refutes the argument of the brain creating consciousness. Because if it's causal, it would have to be 1-to-1 ratio. Every time you had higher experience, you would have to have excitations to match, and it doesn't seem to be the case through a lot of those different mediums of again, when kids played the choking game, that was essentially a drug-free way to dismantle the dissociative boundary a little bit and have a more trip-like experience.
This part of the brain slows down.
I grew up in the 80s and early 90s. I know all about that game. We were getting in trouble for playing that game.
Yeah.
And we don't condone. I know children have died from doing that.
You can actually get a very similar effect from solid REM sleep. Just practice.
That's good advice.
Dreamscapes. That's
good advice.
Yeah, I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum, but choking isn't a thing we advocate here on Compass of Curiosity.
Definitely, definitely not.
But no,
so we're going to be. I'm sorry, I was going to say we're going to be participants in it, and then we're also doing the digital seance experience.
We're going to
see if we can have correlation.
Yeah, we're going to go under as well and partake in the experiment, and then also we're going to, for correlative purposes, right? If people have their session when they go under, and then they're immediately whisked off premises to an offsite, on property but offsite exit interview, and then that data is all kept proprietary, so nobody knows what was taken down and what they experienced. But if during a timestamp session, when they say, let's say they were walking through a field of purple flowers, and then through the digital seance, timestamped correlative, it says, the voice says purple flowers, or names the person and says walking in flowers or something, then we've got something interesting that correlates to the whole idea.
Hold on. Right? Does it correlate or is it causal? Because if you're putting someone into a metaphysical state, and then something picking up on metaphysical waves validates an experience there, could it not be causal, not correlative?
Which thing are you attributing causal to the voice coming through, or to the experience that the person has under?
So could it potentially be the person that's that is under actually pushing that message through?
Yes, absolutely, and that's the correlation we're looking for.
Well, wouldn't that be? Maybe I'm.
Well, it's causal,
Okay.
Yes, you're not wrong. In principle, it's causal but to attribute it to, like, we couldn't pin it down that it was actually them. We
Fair.
correlate it.
Fair.
And that's, but you're not, in principle, you're not wrong. And honestly, I would rather you be 100% right on that, because that would be stronger validation for us to say that it was causal. We can assume it. I mean, it meets a prima facie level of plausibility to say that that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Because when we say we're communicating, when we do our digital seance experience, we say we communicate with consciousness. We don't necessarily say spirit. So, I mean, whether it be consciousness with a meat suit or without a meat suit,
Yeah.
you know.
I love that you just started saying that. I love it.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, I'm just looking for pilots without a suit, because I don't know how to describe it. Like, because I don't know, there's so much connotation between soul and ghost and spirit, and there's so many different underlining subjective definitions of all of these different words.
It's a linguistic nightmare. Language compels us to say things just for the purposes of conveying and communicating, but it makes it a mess, because then we think that the thing described supersedes the thing. The description supersedes the thing described, right? That's the physicalist paradigm. We think that we live in a world of pounds, yards, feet, hertz. You can't hand me 5 kilohertz. It's a description, right? It describes the experience, right? But
it doesn't help that we speak English as well.
No,
because it's a Germanic language following Romantic grammatical structure.
Oh,
it is
yeah.
the most piecemeal hackney language on the planet.
Yeah.
Because there. And
then add on top of that, that people don't know how to speak the language well. On top of that,
so native speakers are often the worst speakers of the language.
Oh no, it's true.
Oh yeah, no, it's spot on.
Language is a problem.
It is a big problem. But that's part of the what we've been indoctrinated into through a physicalist paradigm, which is what you learn in school. And so people think that we live in a world that exists outside of consciousness. It's exhaustively explained in quantities of pounds and feet and yards, but to think that way is to say that the map comes before the territory. The map points to something else. It's referential. It doesn't have any value without the territory. It can't come, but you can't take the state of New York out of the map. But that's what we think is what's going on.
Right. It's like when people tend to say that when we pass on, we take our consciousness with us. But it's not that we take our consciousness with us, is we are consciousnness. We're consciousness.
Behind. That's all it is.
Right. Which is the appearance of it. I think to mistake the consciousness with the physical, like you're saying, is to mistake the footprint for the animal's gait. Right. One thing is the impression made by the thing that is ontologically something, fundamentally something, and the other thing is the impression of it as perceived by the observer. Not
I think I
necessarily
figured out
the same thing.
On AI is you don't view carbon-based life form as machines.
No, that's a good distinction.
That's a good distinction.
That's a very good distinction.
Right.
Yep.
Because we require fuel to operate. We are adaptive machines, in my perspective, but at the end of the day, we're just a machine. We're being piloted by something that is not of organic nature, and it's just a machine.
How do we know that? How do we know that we're being piloted by something that's not of organic nature?
You can actually take a look at how the brainwave functions with impressionistic gamma waves. So they've done the actual full-on studies where a person, fully conscious, fully in control of their body, have been hooked up and can trigger physical responses in the body by bombarding and to an absurd level. It like the practical utilization of this is non-existent. But bombarding the brain with the appropriate waves can actually trigger physical responses in the body. It's similar to like the old mythical brown note.
Okay.
And that's where kind of the myth came from. That's where the study of the brown note came from. This is the study where the myth of the brown note came from, where you were able to actually trigger physical responses based on different wavelengths that you were and different sound waves that you were bombarding the body with, which means the body is an externally controllable object. We don't know how to do it 100% yet, but we do. But then you take the medical studies that have actually been done on the brain dead, where there is brain death, right? Well, the moment you start introducing those waves, you start having physical reaction again. So it's not that and brain dead is such kind of a bullshit term, because the brain isn't dead. It's still operating. It's just not capable of operating the body anymore. So whatever consciousness was there is gone.
Right.
And that's why they say brain dead, is because there's been a divorce of the consciousness.
Right. I agree. I'm sorry.
No. And so
I just want to forget.
We've proven that it can be externally controlled. We've also proven that in the absence of a consciousness, it will breathe, it will sustain, it will continue until it runs out of fuel. Just like if I turn my car on and get out of it, it will continue to run until the gas tank empties or the engine breaks. Same with a body. The moment we get out of it, it'll continue to run until the fuel runs out or the engine breaks. That's not the ideal way of leaving the body. Obviously, we were waiting for the engine to break or the fuel to run out, and then we exit. But in the instances where we've exited earlier, we have the aftermath. We have the non-functioning machines left behind.
Right. No, I understand. Yeah, I mean, I see that there's some crossover correlation to that.
I mean, it makes sense, because if we think, right, consciousness, and if we think of consciousness as like kind of a wave, and if that's raw experience, I mean, I can see what he's saying.
No, yeah, I get the point. I guess, well, one of the differences is even like from a mechanistic standpoint, right? There are things that our bodies have to be able to do to defend themselves, and some of the adaptive capabilities. I would not dismiss that thing, hat in hand, kind of like, because those are huge differences, I think, between a mechanistic system. A mechanistic system can't or does not have to defend itself. It doesn't have mutations where we can have something that, like a cancer, or something that's not.
All right, before you get into this
All right,
big discussion,
we gotta.
I know, because I have to do work, and then I'm going to stay.
I'm never going to argue that we are incapable of developing a machine as complex and as adaptive as the one we're piloting. But all right, have a good night, guys.
I feel bad.
No.
I mean, I can step in. You guys can keep going.
No,
you guys can keep going.
Confident my wife does not want me to keep going. I'm pretty sure she wants me to go to bed.
Let us say thank you for having us on.
Thank you. It was fun.
It's been fantastic, and for people watching, even if they're watching this in replay, this is a show that I hope that they continue to support and should continue watching, because you're bringing a level of education and intellectual prowess to the discussions that need to be had that are not commonplace enough.
I'm way more ignorant usually on this show than this. This is Russ is Russ and I are usually riffing and goofing off. My Thursdays is where I do this, and so Russ is kind of hanging out in the background, and he's taking the bridle off of me to run down these things.
He's like, "Wait a minute, it's Monday. What's going on?"
Well, you ran down it quite well. It was absolutely fun, and again, I think
it was awesome to ride side by side on you. It was awesome.
Your ability to articulate those ideas and explain things was really, really impressive and really, really cool and refreshing. Likewise. I think to experience.
Absolutely, likewise. It was awesome. I've had a ton of fun tonight.
Yeah, this was cool.
Thank you.
So thank you for having us on.
Thank you, the moderator.
I know, the moderator.
That is a nickname that just kind of stuck. We were at an event. Some guests canceled. We had to fill a spot, and we were panicking. And I just said, "Get me 3 people. Just find 3 people that have done stuff, and I'll moderate a panel. Like I'll just go moderate a panel." And I had about 25 minutes of prep time, and we ended up doing an hour-and-a-half panel.
Well, there you go.
It was supposed to be like a 45-minute to an hour, and we ended up going an hour-and-a-half. And so,
what did that tell you?
Started calling me the moderator after that. And so, Russ, final words for our amazing guests.
I am half in and out of sleep over here, but I really do appreciate the both of you coming on tonight. From what I understood the conversation, it was absolutely amazing. And I actually texted Ian on the side and said this was a perfect night for me to go down, because this lets him run wild on anything he loves. And I knew this would be right up his alley. So thank you so much for inhibiting his curiosity and allowing him to flex his intellectual muscles.
He has a lot to flex, and he ran with it and carried the show from the hosting side extremely well. Extremely well.
Thank you for having us, and feel better, Russ.
Yes, and feel better.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good night. And I can't wait for you guys and Ian to meet in September in Maine, because I have a feeling you both will have some very good conversations.
Do you like whiskey?
What's that?
Whiskey fans?
Whiskey?
He does
more her probably.
Yeah, I'm the drinker. He's not so much.
We're gonna do this. We're gonna do this. And Ron, you'll be shocked at how long I can hang in these conversations and how low in the bottle I get before I fall off.
I find that plausible.
Yeah. But all right. I'm gonna put you guys on the back here. We're gonna do our farewells. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, guys. I greatly
thank
appreciate
you.
it. A tremendous show. I had so much fun. I needed this tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you guys again.
All right, Russ, we are at the end of another episode of Compass of Curiosities. You usually do our send-off.
We were very much graced by some wonderful, fantastic guests that hung in with you for so long.
Oh yeah, 2.5 hours.
I mean, like really hung in, and I could tell I've been here the whole time listening and everything. Good news is the nausea has gotten better, thankfully.
Nice.
But also it's one of those things where I'm glad you got to run wild on a topic with a guest, by the way. Because normally it's just you.
It was a playground. I had
exactly
the today that I don't normally get the opportunity to really dive into stuff with. So I loved it. It was great.
So guys, as you know, the name of the show is Compass Curiosities. We always keep you guessing on our guests. So just like we did with Ron and Lourdes and Tony and Sherry, the next 2 weeks we have back-to-back authors that are in the fantasy area. Derek Barton, who was supposed to be on the show a couple weeks ago and had to cancel. He will be on next week. And then we have Brian Payon, who is part of the Get Haunted family. He will be coming on to discuss his books and whatnot. So
I can't wait. I am admittedly on Brian's book. I'm going to be doing a chapter by chapter reading.
Good.
Because I just find anything that stokes Rob's ego even a little bit, I can't help myself but to indulge and just have fun with it. So
you got it. But
you guys got to check out the book. It's amazing.
Thank you so much for listening in.
Romantasy, right? Is the category?
I think so. I think so. But actually, in real life, Brian is an actual detective.
Yep.
And so it's interesting to see the correlation in some of his writings from everyday experience to what he transcribes on pages. So, but guys, thank you so much for hanging in with us. You guys have been absolutely amazing. As always, couldn't do this without you guys.
Stay blessed.
The first annual Maine Paranormal and Horror Con is coming to Maine on September 6th and 7th at the Augusta Civic Center. Come meet your favorite paranormal investigators, cryptid hunters, and horror icons. Special guests include John Zaffis, the haunted collector from Sci-Fi, Jeff and Willie from Mountain Monsters, Bob Elmore Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, CJ Graham, also known as Jason Voorhees from Jason Lives Part 6, Ronnie LeBlanc from Expedition Bigfoot, and many more to be announced. Tickets are on sale now. Go to mainparahorror.com to get your tickets and VIP packages now. For more information, check out Maine Paranormal and HorrorCon on Facebook and Instagram.